Good morning, everybody. Well, the royal wedding is absolutely dominating everything. One Sunday newspaper has 47 pages of photographs, and if you look across other news media, radio, television this morning, there's almost a competition going on from public figures to sort of outbid each other in saying how wonderful the whole day was. Well, it was rather special. I was down there on Thursday, 48 hours before. I thought the atmosphere was quite extraordinary. I think the whole thing is a magnificent advert for the country. The weather was perfect. And sure, there's lots to talk about, and we will talk about it from somebody who was there yesterday. But other things are going on. And there's a really, I think, very big story out there. And you'd struggle, if you went through today's newspapers, to really find it. The Sunday Times have done more on it than anybody else. But it's what's going on in Italy. Often we get the impression in this country from those that wish us to remain in the European Union and would like to force a second referendum on us that we're the ones with the problem. But everything in Brussels and across the EU is hunky-dory. Well, it's not, is it? Remember Catalonia. Remember what's going on with Poland, with Hungary. Big arguments with the European Commission. But tomorrow, a new government will be formed in Italy. It is made up of the Lega, who before were the Northern League. They've dropped the northern bit in a bid to get votes across the whole of Italy, and they're joining up with the Five Star movement. The Lega are on the right of politics, Five Star are just a bit to the left. I know both of these parties very well. I sat for 10 years in the European Parliament with the Lega, and I currently sit with the Five Star movement, and the founder of it, Beppe Grillo, and I did a deal back in 2014. We have before seen a government in Greece elected saying that it would break all of the rules, and then, in the face of Brussels deciding not to. I wonder how significant is this Italian government tomorrow? And to help us through that, I'm going to go to Peter Foster, Europe editor of the Daily Telegraph. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Nigel.
How big a moment do you believe this is?
I think potentially it's an enormous moment. I'm delighted that you're leading the show with it. I think that will look like a wise decision in a few months' time. Since the bond crisis in 2012, as you know, there's just been a succession of technocratic governments in Italy, starting with Mario Monti, which has sort of masked the fact that Italy, which is the third biggest country in the Eurozone, has fallen out of love with Europe in a spectacular fashion. And this government will give an extraordinary mouthpiece to that. The extent to which, as you say, they can break the rules from Brussels is going to be fascinating. They're introducing in their programme at least a minimum income. They want to scrap the pension reforms, which was seen as the sort of benchmark of Italian structural reforms. If they did everything that have in their programme, they'd see the budget deficit hit nearly 6% of GDP. As you know, that's
which is double what they're allowed to do.
Which is double what they're allowed to do. And you saw the bond markets tightening pretty hard the back end of last week. So, there will be a standoff, I think, between the markets, sell-off on the Italian stock market as well by internationals. But I think that the really key thing here is that even if the leaders are unable to push through a lot of these policies, when they start to hit the kind of reality buffer, guess who they're going to blame? They're going to blame the ayatollahs of austerity in Brussels. They're going to blame a German-led
They're going to blame the Germans, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to blame the Germans. And it's going to be messy. And, as you said at the top, Brexit, the wretched Brits, they were half out anyway. They weren't in Schengen. They weren't in the Euro. That Farage, he's always, we didn't want him anyway.
Quite.
And then the Hungarians and the Poles, they were never really Europeans, were they? We took them in because it was that, or, we had to kind of bring them in after the fall of the Berlin Wall. But, when you've got the third biggest, it's not called the Treaty of Rome for nothing, the third biggest economy in the Eurozone, basically coming to European summits. And we haven't talked about immigration policy, but essentially, adopting positions that are fundamentally, the antithesis of the core Eurozone. I mean, Mr. Macron's reforms now potentially look pretty shaky. So I think it is a big moment.
And a different attitude towards Russia as well.
Again, I mean, which Italy has had for a long time. If you talk to senior Italian officials, Italy, there's a lot of Russian money in Italian banks. There's a lot of Russian money in Italian property, and there's a lot of business interests between Italy and Russia. And they've always been lukewarm about the sanctions that were put on Russia after the Ukraine crisis. And again, it's one example of where, in the past, a sort of sensible technocratic government, Gentiloni, Renzi, Mario Monti.
Monti, of course, he wasn't even elected, was he? He was just appointed.
No, there have been a number. I mean, that's the problem. And so these governments have been relied upon essentially to toe the line, the sort of sensible line in Brussels. The difficulty they've got now is that's no longer the case. And again, you expect, say, Hungary to be chafing. I interviewed Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. He said, look, we don't like these sanctions on Russia, but we're only a small country. What are we expected to do? Ultimately, we have to toe the line. Now, it will be really interesting to see the next time Russian sanctions come up. If this five-star Lega government holds, what are you going to do when Italy is around the table saying no? That's a much bigger problem than Hungary.
Now, when in Greece we saw a very left-wing government elected under Mr. Tsipras, Syriza was the name of the party, and they promised to break all of the rules. And I remember I saw Tsipras coming out of that meeting with the European Commission, and I looked straight into the eyes of a completely beaten man. I don't know what they threatened him with. I mean, goodness only knows. But suddenly, having been elected on this populist wave of we're not going to obey these German-dominated rules, he basically collapsed and caved. What pressure do you think they're going to try and bring on this new Italian government to toe the line?
I think there will be massive pressure, and it'll come partly from the markets. If it looks like, a bit like when Trump was elected, no one was quite sure what Trump was going to do. Was he really going to carry on? And it will be interesting to see whether they can, in the face of market pressure, which will build, once, Italian debt spreads, the gap between the price of an Italian bond and a German bond starts to widen, then you'll find, Italian debt to GDP ratio is 130%, and they will find themselves under huge pressure to finance, the cost of Italian debt, and that will, my guess is, probably limit what they can actually do, and then you're going to have more angry Italians because yet another government has failed to deliver on its promises, yet another government, and so that will push them to push the Europeans very hard. You see what I mean? You end up in a push and pull situation where the markets and the Eurozone authorities squeeze them to say, you just can't do this. But we've promised people, and the danger for the Europeans is that actually the government falls and you end up with even more angry Italians.
And
you don't solve the problem.
And they don't have, you could always argue in France and Germany, however imperfect Brussels is, 3 wars in the space of 70 years between those countries, there is some residual love for the project in both of those countries. Italy, of course, doesn't have any of that. Let me ask you, Peter, straight, do you think that this Italian government poses a bigger threat to the European Union project than Brexit?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
Well, that's a pretty straight answer, and I'm with you 100%. Peter Foster, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That was Peter Foster, Europe editor of the Daily Telegraph, and that's the premise I'm putting to you. I think this poses a bigger threat to the future of the European Union than Brexit ever did. I've got Rhys from Lambeth on the line. Good morning, Rhys.
Good morning, Nigel.
Do you agree with my prognosis here?
Yes, I do, because the thing about the UK is we're not integrated into the euro currency the same way that Italy is. So if a country like the UK was to leave, or Denmark, or Sweden, or Hungary, it'll pose a threat, but not the biggest threat, because what holds the EU together mostly is the Schengen zone and the euro currency. Now, if Italy does leave the euro currency, it seems as though the five-star movement and Lega Nord, or Nord as it's now called, a backtrack. I still think if they decide to go forward with it, if Italy leaves, potentially other countries will leave the euro, and then the whole thing's pretty much kaput, isn't it?
Yeah, Rhys, I think that, and I understand Peter Foster's point that the markets will put pressure on. It may start to be difficult for the Italian government to borrow. They've got this massive, accumulated debt, which is 132% of annual GDP. So they've got some real the real problem, Rhys, is that Italy should never have joined the euro. It's been a catastrophic mistake.
Nigel, it's a terrible currency. It was it has caused so much misery for the Italians. I'm glad we never joined. If we did, bloody hell, where would we be now?
Well, I think if we joined it, I'm not sure Brexit would have happened, because I think the argument...
It would have been difficult for it to happen.
Because the argument, how do you unravel this, would have been very, very difficult indeed. Rhys, do you think the end of the European Union would be a good thing or potentially quite dangerous?
I'm probably going to say something that's going to offend a lot of people. I think one of the best things to happen to Europe since 1945. It was a terrible union. It's never been created. If it was just a common market, fine. But it's now become a political union. I'm glad we've left the bloody stupid thing. I hope the same as well.
Enough of the B word this time on a Sunday morning. Rhys, thank you very much for your call. Marcus on Facebook says, the new Italian government and Brexit are both huge threats to Brussels. They know that the other European nations will follow soon. It's taking time, but the lions are roaring. Brexit was the start. Hubert says, a danger for a union of 27 countries, its leaders, and 450 million citizens, ? The EU economies are going from strength to strength. Britain has a lot of catching up to do. Well, Hubert, we've had times over the last 15 years when we have been growing more quickly than the Eurozone. Right now, the Eurozone is growing more quickly than we are. We have a productivity problem in this country. Lots of people in work, but not enough being produced. But the idea, as I said at the start, that we're the ones with the problem, that everything's fine and dandy in Brussels and around the member states, just isn't true. They are facing a really, really big problem. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC, and it's now 10:15.
LBC at the weekend. Majid Nawaz.
Obesity. Now, the Mayor of London wants to do something about it. On the one hand, you're worried about obesity and wanting to ban junk food adverts. On the other hand, you're banning adverts on the underground that show and feature a woman in a bikini because she was selling health supplements. And I'll tell you the solution to that. Let's stop banning things and let's start addressing things from an education perspective.
Leading Britain's conversation. Majid Nawaz. Today from 12 on LBC.
Emirates are bringing the other side of the world closer to home with daily flights from London Stansted. Starting the 8th of June, you'll be able to fly from London Stansted all the way to Dubai and on to over 150 destinations worldwide, making getting from your home to the other side of the world much simpler. Fly Emirates from London Stansted and discover the other side of the world.
Is your company thinking of moving office? If so, this could be the perfect opportunity to revolutionise your business, transform your workplace, and inspire your staff. Speak to Maris Interiors, who've been designing and fitting out workplaces for over 3 decades. Book your free consultation, attend a free seminar, or get your free guidebook. Go to officerelocation.co.uk. Maris. Workplace design experts.
Don't miss Oak Furniture Land's up to 50% off Big Price Drop event. There's amazing deals on 100% solid hardwood collections. Hurry, Big Price Drop must end Sunday.
Know-it-alls. Nothing worse. But I'm not going to pretend I know everything. I just want you to have a think about what you drink at home through the week. The couple with a takeaway. The few in front of the telly. Cutting out just a few of those drinks could improve your health and even lower your blood pressure. And would you really miss them? Ultimately, it's your shout. Have a little less. Feel a lot better. Download the Drinkaware app to get started.
Look away for a second, and the world can change forever. When Kip Brown's son is taken, his world is turned upside down. To get him back, he's going to have to pay. That's where Detective Superintendent Roy Grace comes in. But a parent's worst nightmare soon becomes Grace's most shocking case yet. Dead If You Don't is the gripping new novel from award-winning crime author Peter James. Dead If You Don't. Available in all good bookshops. Buy your copy today.
This is the sound of a broken boiler.
Oh.
And having to fork out for a new one.
Oh.
Then finding out you can get interest-free credit until the 31st of May.
Oh.
Not blowing your savings on a new boiler feels good. We're with you. Search British Gas New Boiler. Credit subject to status, conditions apply.
Do you or a loved one have Alzheimer's disease and problems sleeping? Then St Pancras Clinical Research in London would like to hear from you. We're looking for volunteers aged 50 plus with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease to take part in a clinical research study. If you qualify, you'll be paid for your time and reasonable expenses. Find out more at stpancreasclinicalresearch.com. That's stpancreasclinicalresearch.com.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
So tomorrow, the Five-Star Movement and the League will go to the Italian president and they will form a new government. They have a platform. One or two of the early ideas, such as demanding Brussels write off 250 billion euros worth of debt, appear to have been dropped. But they are talking about the repatriation of 500,000 illegal migrants. They are talking about ending sanctions on Putin's Russia. They are talking about an affirmation that Italy is a Christian country. And they've got a whole raft of spending plans that would probably put them at double the limit for the size of their economy that is allowed by the Brussels rules. Now, the only question to be sorted out tomorrow is who is the Prime Minister going to be? No one quite knows, but I love this quote. There is a certain Silvio Berlusconi who has 9 years of experience in government and is available. Guess who said that? Silvio Berlusconi. So at 81 years old, he has decided that he wants to be the Prime Minister again. I don't think they're going to pick him. But it's interesting because Berlusconi's party, these two parties have 50% of the vote. Berlusconi's party is about another 16% of the vote. So what you're beginning to see is Italian mainstream politics is now very much of a Eurosceptic disposition. And Theo on Facebook makes a point of this. He says, surely this is a bigger threat to Brussels than Brexit because we're talking about a coalition of Eurosceptic parties, unlike Brexit. In Britain, the people may have opposed the EU, but not really the mainstream political parties. So, I think this does pose a very fundamental threat. There could be all sorts of market dislocation. I personally, of course, am not a fan of the European project. I think it'd be far better if sovereign states cooperated together rather than being run by the European Commission. That's my view. But Jason in Sutton, who's a regular caller to this show, often takes a different view. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning to you, Nigel. Good morning. Happy Sunday to you. Why is it you just pick on any country with a problem, you find the problem and then blame it on the European Union? It just fascinates me.
Well, Jason, what I'm saying, of course, is that joining the euro was a catastrophic error for the Italian economy. And they've basically had zero growth, Jason, for 20 years.
And yet, if Britain had joined the euro back in 1997, we would be 30% wealthier than we are today as a country in Britain.
You're having a laugh.
No, you can look at the facts.
Jason, if we joined the euro, we'd have been like Greece with our budget deficit. Goodness knows what would have happened to us. It would have been a catastrophe if we joined the euro.
Well, so say some, but we'll never know, will we, apart from the historical facts. But if you look at Italy, it's got 250 billion euros of debt with the other European Union countries.
Yep.
You can't say that that's the fault of the European Union.
No.
Countries. Where would they have gone if they were not members of the European Union? Where would they have had to go to get that money?
They had something called the lira, Jason. And of course, the lira very often went through stages of competitive devaluation. Now, you could argue that a country that uses devaluation isn't actually tackling the social, economic problems that it's got itself. But the point is, as soon as you merge your currency with effectively the Deutschmark, because that's what they did, then, unless your economy and your structures become like Germany's, you've got a problem. And you have two choices. With the lira, you could devalue your currency. With the euro, they've had to devalue the country. And I'm saying, Jason, they should never have joined the euro.
But that's one out of, 19 Eurozone countries?
Oh, there are many others. There are many others, Jason.
The same problem. What the problem is caused by is total mismanagement by a series of governments that don't know what they're doing in Italy, including the technocratic one. And this goes back a long time. It's nothing to do with the European Union or the currency. Otherwise, all 19 countries would have the same problem. You're picking one problem and blaming...
Jason, there is a cultural division between the north of Europe and the south of Europe, a cultural division in terms of attitudes towards work, a cultural attitude towards government, towards paying taxes. I mean, these differences, I believe these differences are irreconcilable. Now, I was arguing that, Jason, back in 1999, all the way through the formation of the euro, and frankly, those in Brussels thought, once we get them in the straitjacket, they will change their government, they'll become more efficient, they'll become more like the Germans. But it's very difficult to culturally change people.
Oh, hang on. The tax avoidance isn't just the policy of the Southern Europeans. I mean, there's yourself with the Isle of Man pension schemes.
Jason, let me tell you, Jason, I did business in Italy. £34 billion of unpaid corporate taxes in the UK. £34 billion is what we're losing. We're not collecting. All right. So, Jason, are you saying to this show that culturally attitudes towards tax avoidance are the same in Britain and Germany as they are in Greece and Italy?
I don't think it's tax avoidance as such. It's more of a cash economy over there.
Jason, I'm sorry, but my 7 years of dealing with major Italian companies have taught me different. Anyway, we are where we are. Do you, Jason, think this Italian government poses a threat to the future of the European project?
I think it poses a threat to wider areas than that. I mean, I can't think of another sort of far-right fascist almost government in Italy since the Second World War.
Oh, please believe me, the Five Star Movement are more to the left of politics than they are to the right.
That's a good thing. I'm not so sure it is either.
Well, no, but the point I'm making is you can't call them fascist. I mean, Beppe Grillo, the stand-up comedian who founded that party, I mean, that party has what we would call a big social conscience. They're not right.
They're not right-wing?
No, they're not right-wingers at all.
So how come you've been hanging out with them so much?
Because I've always, Jason, worked with people from the right, centre and left of politics to achieve my goals. And those that want to pigeonhole me somewhere, they've tried jolly hard, but they're losing. Jason, as ever, I thank you for your call. Messages flowing in. All thanks go to Italy for this favour to us. Let's hope the whole bucket blows up in Brussels' face and there'll be no EU for us to leave. Graham, I've been saying for years, I want us to leave before the whole thing falls to pieces. I would lose a great sense of satisfaction if we couldn't do this. Italy will put even more nails in the EU Commission's coffin. Perhaps it's time our Euro fanatics woke up and smelt the coffee. Richard, I keep saying this every week. The Lord Adonises and these people who want us to basically stay in the European Union, what are we staying in? We're staying in something that I think is increasingly fragmenting. John is calling from Los Beliches in Spain. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. I'm more concerned. I think the Italian situation, they're probably putting enough pressure on Italy to the new government to water things down. But what concerns me more, what we don't hear too much about, is we've had a 10-year record of a bull market, as you know.
We have.
The record.
We have.
I think the Trumponomics has probably increased the chances of not having one in the next year or two. But, when crashes come, and I've basically seen them all, they come very fast and many, many people can't recognize them coming. And that, to me, is the biggest worry about the EU, because effectively Germany is going to have to put billions into Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean countries, countries, and I don't think the German people would want to put the billions.
John, I mean, the politics of Germany is changing, isn't it? I mean, the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, they are now second in the opinion polls in Germany.
Yep, understandable, and I don't think with that pressure that Merkel is much, much weaker than she has been, and consequently, I think the next crash we get, I think Europe's going to crash too. I don't think the UK would have been too much bothered with the Euro, joining the Eurozone, because we know how to have our own currency, and I think the biggest downfall of the Euro, problem of the Euro, is that no harmonization of anything before it was brought into being, and also the fact that the UK, the major countries like Germany's probably working with a currency 30% discount to what it should be. The UK probably would have been on par, but it's very detrimental to countries such as the Mediterranean countries, which could be working with a currency maybe 20% below what it is now, but they're not.
John, I have to say, I think you're right. I think there's no reason why Brexit can't be done without severe economic dislocation, but it's very difficult to see how the Eurozone breaks up without very big risks to the markets. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I still think long-term it's the right thing to do. I take the political view, John, that had Europe been a cooperative club, it might have been a success, but it massively overstretched itself, and the euro perhaps being the best example of that.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll sign off and say to you, give my regards to Manuel.
Well, I certainly will. John, thank you. And I will be in Brussels this week, where I'm going to be meeting Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, he's coming to meet the Conference of Presidents, the heads of political groups, and that'll happen on Tuesday evening. I will get the opportunity to ask him a question. It's not going to be videoed or filmed, but the event will be minuted. And I will, over the course of the next 48 hours, come to some of you and ask you what kind of areas and what kind of worries do you have about your personal privacy using Facebook. And I know a lot of people are very concerned indeed. Mick takes the view that Italy will cave in and toe the line because the EU will threaten them. Well, Mick, the EU will threaten them. The EU do threaten people, and the EU always seem to win by using those tactics. But there is a day coming when that is just not going to be the case. We could be very close to it. Anyway, you're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It is now 10:30 and time for the news with Philip Chrysikos.
The royal family is thanking people for their support and enthusiasm following the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's wedding. Celebrations finished overnight with a black tie wedding dinner at Frogmore House, hosted by Prince Charles for 250 of Harry and Meghan's closest family and friends. The largest rescheduling of train timetables for 7 years has come into force this morning. More than 4 million trains are affected. The Rail Delivery Group, which brings together the companies that run Britain's network, says it's to improve services. The Culture Secretary has told LBC new laws will make Britain the safest place in the world to be online. Matt Hancock says they'll deal with, in his words, the internet's Wild West. LBC weather, showers in the northwest, warm and sunny elsewhere, a high of 22 degrees.
LBC travel in Hertfordshire on the M25 clockwise. There's a lane closed because a car's broken down between junction 23 for the A1M and junction 24 for Potters Bar. In Hackney, roads are closed because of the Hackney Half Marathon, including Lower Clapton Road, Dalston Lane and Graham Road. Roads will start to reopen from 11:30, with all roads back open by 2 o'clock this afternoon. In Barking, on the A13 westbound at the Lodge Avenue flyover, a lane stays closed for emergency repairs. It's slow from the Goresbrook interchange now. In West Norwood, Knights Hill is blocked both ways because of an accident at Crowndale. And on the rails, there are cancellations on Great Northern and Thameslink. That's because of a shortage of train crew. LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff.
This is LBC.
My house, my office, they're a mess. You need London storage vaults. Their self-storage units are in an underground vault near Oxford Circus, so they're completely safe. They're also climate controlled, so they're ideal for anything from paperwork to fine wines. Sounds great. They'll collect your stuff for free if you're in zones 1 and 2. There's 24/7 access and all from just £10 a week.
London Storage Vaults, the future of self-storage. Visit londonstoragevaults.com. Terms and conditions apply.
That looks very good, sir. Really? Have to say, I love the colour. And I can tailor it to suit me exactly. Of course. We have lots of options. How's the fit? Yeah, brilliant. Loads of room. Good to hear. So that you can be sure you like it, why don't you have it over the weekend? Perfect. It'll turn a few heads in town, and I think my friends are going to love it. Excellent. Here are the keys.
The stylish, spacious Mini Clubman. Take a 48-hour test drive to try one on for size. Who's in? Test drive subject to status and availability. Terms and conditions apply. Participating Mini retailers only.
Emirates are bringing the other side of the world closer to home with daily flights from London Stansted. Starting the 8th of June, you'll be able to fly from London Stansted all the way to Dubai and on to over 150 destinations worldwide, making getting from your home to the other side of the world much simpler. Fly Emirates from London Stansted and discover the other side of the world.
This is the sound of someone with a million things to do waiting in. Your time is precious. We're with you. So our engineers call ahead to let you know when they're on their way. When you're with British Gas, we're with you. 95% of engineers call ahead.
Hi, I know you own a small business and I'm wondering if you're interested in some very well-paid new work.
Funnily enough, did you know that about 59% of new customers don't leave a voicemail? Luckily, I'm not one of them. So call me on 074...
Don't cut off new business. Manage and divert your calls with eReceptionist so you'll never miss an opportunity again. Sign up for a free 30-day trial now at ereceptionist.co.uk. T's and C's apply. See website for details.
Your future is here. The Global Academy, a forward-thinking state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Visit globalacademy.com to find out more.
When the beast from the east struck, snow fell, temperatures plummeted, and the country ground to a halt. But Swale Heating leapt into action. Over the week, we helped over 10,000 homes stay warm and safe. To find out more about our boiler installations and maintenance schemes, visit swaleheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Now, Italy could be about to blow up the whole European Union project, and I think it's a really major news story that is not getting the kind of debate and coverage that it should be, but it will over the course of the coming weeks and months. Mind you, not many stories really are getting much coverage in the newspapers today because there was a certain event that took place in Windsor yesterday and everyone seems to be talking about it. To help me through this, I'm going to get people watcher Andrew Pearce, columnist and consultant editor for the Daily Mail, and of course, LBC presenter on Friday evenings from 7 till 10. And Andrew, you were there in Windsor yesterday.
I was, Nigel. It was memorable, actually. You never know what to expect. I covered the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, which was great, but it was Buckingham Palace, it was central London, it was Westminster Abbey. The setting of Windsor Castle was just magical, actually. It is almost like a fairy tale location. If a Hollywood producer, Nigel... Yeah. Pitch a royal wedding, it would be Windsor with those glorious grounds, those glorious turrets and battlements. And the royals do pageantry so well. So after all the disasters of the build-up to the wedding with Meghan's father, Woody or Wonty, and those ghastly sisters and brothers saying terrible things about her, they pulled it as ever. They pulled it off, and it was a brilliant spectacle. And the atmosphere was extraordinary.
Yeah, but I was there on Thursday, Andrew, and so 48 hours before the wedding, and the household cavalry were doing marching and drill and practising, and there were thousands of people. And I thought even on Thursday it seemed a pretty remarkable buzz about the place. And I agree with you. I mean, I was on the Fox News set, and it looked so unreal. It was almost like Disney. It looked so extraordinary.
I know. It is our version of Camelot, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's huge affection for Harry as well, because, not least, I think, because he lost his mother at such a young age. Everybody remembers that iconic image of little Harry, aged 11, walking behind his mother's coffin, which was heartbreaking to watch. And then to see him so happy with this remarkable young woman who is mixed race, she's divorced. Wouldn't Diana approve?
You're probably right in every sense, actually. But Andrew, he was the rebel prince, wasn't he? He was the carouser. He was the party animal. He was the guy that broke the rules, and it didn't matter because he was never going to be king anyway. And I didn't seem to see many of his old drinking mates in Windsor yesterday. It seemed to be sort of A-listers. I mean, has she changed Harry?
I suspect she's changed him a bit. I think all young men quieten down a bit. I know what I was like in my 20s, but I think he has tamed him a bit. I mean, there were one or two of his mates there, don't you worry. I spotted Guy Pelly, who was one of his drinking partners. Yeah. I think he was at that infamous party where Harry, who was only 18, for God's sake, was wearing Nazi uniform. But it was fascinating to see people like George Clooney and Amal there, and Idris Elba. Because you have to remember, she's a pretty accomplished actress in her own right. Suits was pretty big. I'd never watched it, of course, but I'm no great judge of popular TV, but it had a big following in the United States, a huge following in Canada where it was filmed. And boy, she didn't look nervous, did she? She was reveling in every moment of it.
No, she was a complete star in every sense yesterday. But parts of the service were, should we say, unconventional. And I wonder, how did the Duke of Edinburgh look during the sort of alternative sermon?
Well, if he stayed awake, that would have been quite something, because, you know, the Queen has a rule, speeches, sermons should be no shorter than 2 minutes, no longer than 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And our dear Bishop from Chicago went on for 13 minutes. He went on, and you could sense people. I mean, I think actually some of the younger royals were laughing. I'm sure Zara Phillips was chuckling.
Well, Charles looked like he was laughing, didn't he?
Yeah. They just knew he'd gone completely over the top. It was his great opportunity for this bishop, and he was completely hammed it up, didn't he? Every moment, every time it got to a certain point, I thought, phew, he's finished. And then he'd be off again with this great philosophical conversation about faith and fire. What was all that about fire, anyway? I never did get to the bottom of that, really. I thought he was sent for the fire brigade or something. And there was very little about the couple, of course, but that's because, of course, he doesn't know them from Adam. But you know why he was there. He was a black bishop, and that was a symbolic statement because of Meghan Markle being mixed race, and because, of course, you know, the Queen is head of 15 states, and many of them are in the Commonwealth, and many of the leaders there are Africans and black people. So you get it, but somebody should have said to the bishop, 7 minutes and sit down, mate.
And overall, a good advert for the country?
Oh, it's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, you couldn't make it up. I mean, wherever I walked yesterday, there was TV being broadcast to the United States, to Canada, the Caribbean, Australia, New Zealand. And I bumped into one of the local dignitaries. I think he was a mayor or something. And I said, this has really put Windsor on the map. He said it was already on the map. He said, but now it's gone on the map. 360 degrees of the globe. Fantastic. It must be worth tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, in terms of a showcase for Britain. I mean, how much would it cost to advertise Windsor in that way on TV worldwide?
Yeah, and I mean, Andrew, when you and I were growing up, there were voices in the House of Commons and elsewhere calling for the abolition of the monarchy. There was quite a strong strain of republicanism that had always existed, in fact, in this country. It had been there for centuries. I think they're going to be keeping quite a low profile now, don't you?
I absolutely do. And, of course, Jeremy Corbyn, we know, didn't watch the royal wedding. He was at some boring Labour economics conference. OK, he's the leader of the opposition. That's what he has to do. And we know he is a Republican, but he's made it quite clear if he was Prime Minister, he would do nothing to upset.
Yeah, it's not a vote winner, is it? It's not a
no vote winner. And you know, it's quite interesting. A lot of people talk about why the Duke of Sussex. Little known fact, Nigel, the first Duke of Sussex and the only Duke of Sussex spent a time living in the United States shortly before or shortly after George III lost the colony. So the royal family picked that title for Harry and for her with great meticulous precision in all they do. The only one, so he's now the second one, and the last one lived in the United States for a bit. So that's quite symbolic.
And was a rebel, wasn't he?
He certainly was. He had 2 marriages, neither of which were recognised by the monarchy because he didn't get permission of his dad. Really tricky to get permission of his dad. His dad was George III, and if anybody watched the film...
He was crackers, wasn't he?
There was a film called The Madness of George III. He was round the twist.
Yeah.
So not easy to get permission from a monarch who's bonkers.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed for joining us this Sunday. Well, it was Andrew Pearce, who... Well, you know, you could say Pearce is a cynical Fleet Street hack. He was blown away by what he saw in Windsor yesterday. And yes, we do wish the Duke and Duchess of Sussex very well indeed. Back to Italy. I'm bombarded by your messages. Kevin makes the point that it's a great shame these countries didn't take action before the EU bankrupted them. It will turn into a very nasty situation. Europe is in big trouble. I think Europe's in big trouble, Kevin. But as I say, I think the breakup of this project, the breakup of this currency, and I'm not saying it's going to come immediately, but I think the signs are there, it could be a very, very painful business. Tina thinks the euro's been a disaster, and so is Schengen. Well, why people still say it's so wonderful is beyond me. Yeah, but, you know, we had Jason on earlier, who was a strong defender of the European principle, and he blames bad management and bad government in Italy, but hey... They've always had bad governments. Ian is calling from Feltham. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, Nigel. About the five-star movement and the Northern League.
Yes.
It's to me, it's like a stack of dominoes that are going to collapse all over Europe. Because you've got Syriza in Greece that tried their best to try and sort the problems out. You've got Marine Le Pen, who was kept out when the rest of them all ganged up against her, keep her out of office. You've got the Hungarian government that's that hasn't let any immigrants in at all, as far as I know. You've got Austria, I think, is lurching to the right. Because these countries, the people, not the countries, have been forced into a corner by basically the European Union, which is basically the Bundesbank, or you could even call it the Fourth Reich, financially, if you like, by dominating Europe through finance instead of military power, and the people have just basically got nowhere to go.
The German point is a very, very important point. You know, Matteo Salvini, who leads the Lega, and they stunned everybody by getting 17% of the vote. By the way, I saw an opinion poll on Friday putting his party now at 25% of the vote. So he is the rising star, in many ways, of Italian politics. But he wants to renegotiate the EU's key treaties because he says, at the moment, we are completely dictated to by the Germans. So there is a growing anti-German sentiment spreading throughout much of Europe. The question is, Ian, will these people stick to the plans that we've read about this morning, or will they back down? Will Juncker and the others put the thumbscrews on them and make them, as Brussels thinks, see sense?
I think they'll back down a bit. But it's a shame about Germany because I've talked to German people. They want the mark back. Yep. They want more independence for nations, and it's people being smeared by the behaviour of their own government and the Central European Commission.
Ian, do you know what? I'll bet anybody that it's difficult, it's retrospective, but had the Germans had a referendum on giving up the Deutschmark for the euro, Ian, you and I both know how they would have voted. And that is the problem. This European project's effectively been foisted upon people who didn't really want it. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC, and it's now 10:45.
This is LBC.
You probably think you're pretty good at multitasking behind the wheel. I mean, you have to multitask to drive. So what's wrong with checking your phone? The thing is, your brain simply doesn't work. Even a quick notification for quick reply affects your concentration and makes you less able to react to hazards. If you use a mobile phone while driving, you're 4 times more likely to crash. Think. Put your phone away.
My house, my office, they're a mess. You need London Storage Vaults. Their self-storage units are in an underground vault near Oxford Circus, so they're completely safe. They're also climate controlled, so they're ideal for anything from paperwork to fine wines. Sounds great. They'll collect your stuff for free if you're in zones 1 and 2. There's 24/7 access and all from just £10 a week.
London Storage Vaults, the future of self-storage. Visit londonstoragevaults.com. Terms and conditions apply.
One thing we've learned over time, there's always room for improvement. Something we've been working on for over 50 years as the UK's #1 commercial vehicle brand. So we asked you, the customer, what we could do to improve our new Transit range. Your response inspired thousands of ideas, creating a new range with a model to fit any business. Take the new Transit Custom, our most versatile and hard-working model yet, with an advanced optional Sync 3 system offering voice control features and much more. Discover what the new Transit range can do for your business at ford.co.uk. Ford. Together, we go further.
This week at Lidl, try a taste of Spain. A platter of Spanish-style tapas, only $1.99. Patatas bravas, just 99p. And churros, also 99p. Visit Lidl for the full Solimar range. So, Costa del Sol now cost a lot less. Subject to availability, and I may vary selected stores while stocks last.
We are working with partners to help
Londoners breathe cleaner air.
That's why we've installed
over 100 new electric rapid charge points.
Some exclusively for taxis.
And others for rapid charging cars and vans.
Now that's a breath of fresh air.
For everyone.
Search TfL improvements.
To the Mayor of London.
And TfL.
Every journey matters.
Don't miss Oak Furnitureland's up to 50% off Big Price Drop event. There's amazing deals on 100% solid hardwood collections. Hurry, Big Price Drop must end Sunday.
This is LBC, The Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet @LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Is Italy going to blow up the European project, or will they back down in the face of Brussels telling them, do this, and your people will suffer financially very heavily indeed? Before I get back to that, John Bercow has been a regular feature on my show ever since I joined the staff at LBC. I am not a fan of John Bercow. I do understand that in some ways he's given backbenchers a little bit more power, a little bit more ability to speak in the Commons since he had the job. But I, for many reasons, don't like John Bercow, least of all because the Speaker, for 800 years, has been neutral. Even during the English Civil War, the Speaker managed to stay neutral, and we have a Speaker who is politically partial. Remember his comments about Donald Trump, for example. Well, he's in a lot of trouble now, I think. We've had a succession of stories about him, bullying is the accusation that gets made, but being pretty short with people, shouting at people. And this kind of got a bit worse, I think, at the end of last week, where he described a senior minister as a stupid woman, and he was referring to Andrea Leadsom. He also said she was effing useless. Downing Street has called this language and this behaviour unacceptable. So, for Number 10 to say the Prime Minister thinks this is unacceptable means this whole thing has actually moved up a gear. And I have to say that even though there is no official investigation now going to happen into bullying, I think he is beginning to lose the support of the Chamber. He's pretty much lost the support of the commentariat, many of whom thought he was a bit pompous but thought he was doing quite a good job. And I have said that already. Quite a lot of backbenchers thought in terms of the job he was doing it okay. It's just his personality and the fact that he isn't politically neutral. And I genuinely think that it would be better for Mr. Bercow to stand down, to resign, rather than get forced at some point out of that office in a very undignified way. That's my view. Back to Italy. Is this new Italian government a bigger threat to the European project than Brexit? Sarah is calling from Leeds. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Nigel. Well, my answer is I bloody hope so, because...
Now, why is everyone using the B word on this Sunday morning? But continue without using it, Sarah, please.
Well, I'm just delighted by the election results, and I just feel that now we're just turning the page. Growing up in Italy, when we had the lira, life was so much better before we changed to the euro. We joined the European Union, and I think it hasn't done the country any good. As you know, we all escaped Italy. People, when I go back, and people are pretty desperate about the situation, and employment, everything else, and now the migration crisis is just...
and industry, Sarah. I mentioned earlier, back in the 90s, when I was working in the metals business, my firm had customers in Italy, and they were the big industrial manufacturing giants of northern Italy. And kind of, in terms of their production, Sarah, they kind of challenged Germany in many ways 20 years ago.
Absolutely, massively. And now where all the manufacturers have been moved away from the country. And I just think, and I just don't mind what the EU is trying to do, like homogenise the whole continent.
It doesn't work, does it?
It doesn't work with different, that chap Jason before said, it's the fault of the Italian government. Yes, it is, because we have massive problems with the mafia and everything else and the corruption in the government. But we managed before, and we're never going to be like Germany. Culturally, it's a massive different mentality.
Yeah. This is the key to it, Sarah, isn't it? It is. How on earth Germany and Greece, or Germany and Italy, can be together? And it's not just a single currency. It's supposed to be a full economic, monetary, and ultimately political union. It isn't going to work. Sarah, do you still have a vote in Italy or not?
Yes, I did, but I left quite young, so I have to say, I've never been really involved in politics. It's just in the last few years, I just took a real interest in, and now here in Brexit as well.
And which, Sarah, I mean, as I say, I know Beppe Grillo quite well, the founder of the five-star movement, and behind him there was a guy called Gian Roberto Casaleggio, who frankly was
the techie.
Yeah,
the techie
I mean,
genius is
techie genius, I think is the word I would use, Sarah. I mean, you know, he completely understood the full potential of social media. He got Beppe, up to 4 to 5 million Twitter followers, huge numbers of Facebook followers. They set up a political party as an online platform. It's actually something I wanted to do with UKIP, but they weren't interested, sadly. But Casaleggio's now died. But for them to have gone from nowhere to getting 32% of the vote.
We've had, in my town where I come from, we've had, council, it was just hugely corrupt. People are getting arrested left, right and centre when I was growing up. And we've had a 5-star mayor for the last 4 years. And there's been so much positive change. You know, actually, the money was being spent on the roads, on the town, the park, just improving the town. It's just, and I do believe that Di Maio is a good guy. I hope they're not going to be persuaded or intimidated, because I do believe he's going to do what he says.
Sarah, they are going to come under the most extraordinary pressure. Already there are European commissioners telling them, don't do this, don't do that. It's going to be a battle royal. Sarah from Leeds, thank you, and she's thrilled at this new government. Christopher on Facebook says, this is a massive blow to the EU, physically and symbolically. All those Eurosceptic countries may do one of two things. They'll all walk away, or they'll all join together and become a nightmare for the EU. So, Christopher, about 10 years ago, a French newspaper said, Nigel Farage is Brussels' worst nightmare because he wants Britain to leave the European Union. In some ways, Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, he's now the EU's worst nightmare, because he doesn't want to leave. He intends to stay in the club and break all of the so-called rules. June is calling from Dartford. Good morning, June.
Good morning, Nigel.
Hi there. So, how do you view this new Italian government?
Very exciting. I was just saying to your researcher, we've got the EU elections coming up next year. Get it flooded with new MEPs from Italy, Hungary, Poland, everywhere. Eurosceptic MEPs to carry on your fantastic work. This is coming from a UKIP member from Dartford.
Yeah, well, do you know what?
Carry on the fight.
Do you know what? I after 20 years, I'm very pleased to be leaving. But in some ways, the next European Parliament promises to be a lot more fun than the previous ones. When I was first there back in 1999, I mean, Eurosceptics were rarer than hen's teeth. And there is now the prospect in this next Parliament of maybe a couple of hundred of them.
Is that all? I think we should get...
it may be 250. I don't know. It could be more. Let's wait and see. Thank you very much indeed. Because time running out. Going to go to Chris in Finchley. Chris, hello.
Listen, it's not all the EU's fault Italy's in the position it's in. Italy is not Britain. If it pulls out, it's bankrupt as it is. The Fiat Group moved most of its production to South America because it's cheaper labour. Italy cannot pull out of Europe. It's not like Britain. Britain has the money to pull out, Nigel. Italy is a corrupt, bankrupt society.
But Chris, my point...
on EC money at the moment. You know that, Nigel, yourself.
Chris, I do accept Italy has some extraordinary problems, and it really does. But that's the point, Chris, about joining the euro. And joining the euro isn't Brussels' fault, it's the fault of Italian politicians for agreeing to it back at the time. Exactly. But all the while they had competitive devaluation with the lira. They could keep their labour prices, for people coming in from overseas at relatively decent levels. They are stuck in some... I mean, Chris, for this to work, Italy itself has to go through fundamental social and societal change. And it just isn't going to happen, is it?
No, the Italians won't stand for... Listen, when the banking crash happened, Ireland had 80% austerity measures to get itself out of trouble.
Yes.
The Italians will not stand for that. You know that, Nigel. They will not stand for it.
No, I agree. I agree.
You take a British company called Dyson. You know Dyson's?
Yeah.
He moved all his production to Malaysia because it was cheaper, and we still pay the money for it. Britain is a very wealthy country. This country can afford to leave Europe and there'll be no problems, Nigel.
But ultimately, Chris...
Everybody knows that.
Ultimately, Chris, and again, another point to make that people don't hoist on board, it's the under-40s in Italy that are voting Eurosceptic. It's the young people right across Europe rebelling against the European Union. We have an anomaly in this country that our younger population are the other way. But, Chris, in the end, if the Italian people want to leave, whatever economic threats they face, they would in the end do it anyway, won't they?
Of course they're going to leave, Nigel, but they're already bankrupt. So blaming Europe is not the issue. The Italians are in their own destiny. They created this through corruption. You've done business in there.
Yes.
Listen, Nigel, I've been around a long time. I remember telling people it's 4 weeks for that part from Italy. You had to wait. In August, September, the whole of Italy closes down.
Yeah, I know. I know. Chris, I thank you. And Italy has got problems, but I have to confess it's still my favourite European country. Absolutely love the place. Well, interesting. Health tourism. It's a subject that I raised back in the 2015 general election to be screamed at, it seemed, from all sides. But now NH bosses have announced they're launching a crackdown on health tourism. People coming into this country from outside the European Union, having babies, getting medical treatment. They're now being presented with bills. Is it time we got tough with health tourists? And if you think it is, call me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think we must be careful. We're a civilised nation after all, in which case text to 84850 and tweet. Let me know what you think. Does something need to be done? Use the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook and comment there too.
On your radio, on your phone, and here.
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock, Windsor is getting back to normal following yesterday's historic royal wedding. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will head home to Kensington Palace later this morning, ahead of continuing with their public duties on Tuesday. Yesterday's ceremony featured a black American bishop and a gospel choir at St George's Chapel. These people say it was a huge step forwards.
For the royal family, but first of all, accepting a lady of colour, into a family, that's a very huge, magnificent step.
The black preacher, there was black choir, there was black celloists, and it's doing something different, not the norm as well. So I think it's absolutely wonderful.
More than 4 million trains across Britain have been rescheduled from today in the largest timetable change for decades. The number of alterations is 7 times larger than normal to introduce new trains and services following billions of pounds of investment. The Culture Secretary admits the government doesn't have the power it needs over social media companies as the government announces new laws to deal with the internet's so-called Wild West. It's after 14 of the largest were invited to a meeting with Matt Hancock, but only 4 attended. But Mr. Hancock has told LBC he's determined to make Britain the safest place in the world to be online.
We've been consulting for 6 months now on measures that we should take to make the internet a safer place, can use it and the brilliant freedoms that it brings, and we have committed today to legislate in the future to make sure we have a duty of care by the large social media providers in particular to ensure the internet is a safe place to be.
A man thought to be in his 20s has died after being stabbed in southwest London. A 44-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after police were called to Mitcham in the early hours of this morning. Nicola Sturgeon says she would reconsider another vote on Scottish independence when the government gives more clarity over Brexit. The First Minister also says the SNP would not oppose a second EU referendum on the outcome of the deal ministers negotiate. The Department of Transport hopes a tougher MOT test, which has come into effect from today, will improve air quality and make Britain's roads safer. Tests on diesel cars now include tighter smoke limits, while a number of functions, including daytime running lights, will be checked for the first time. More Elizabeth Line trains will be running in London from today. Transport for London have taken over Heathrow Connect services from Paddington to Heathrow Airport, ahead of the line opening through central London in December. Chelsea beat Manchester United 1-0 in the FA Cup final at Wembley. There's speculation yesterday evening's match was Antonio Conte's last game in charge. In the Scottish Cup, Celtic are winners for the 38th time. They beat Motherwell 2-0 in the final at Hampden Park. LBC weather, showers in the northwest, warm and sunny elsewhere, a high of 22 degrees. From Global's newsroom, for LBC, I'm Philip Chrysikos.
OK, children, settle down. Thank you for bringing your pets in for Bring Your Pet to School Day. Megan, who is this delightful little ball of fur?
It's Trico, my guinea pig, miss.
Adorable. And Alfie, who's this?
It's Ronaldo, my rabbit, miss.
What a darling. And what's in the wooden crate, Poppy?
Fluffy.
That's a very strong lock. This way, children.
With a Land Rover Discovery, adventure can take you, well, anywhere. Never stop discovering. Search Land Rover Discovery. Land Rover, above and beyond.
LBC Travel, it's very slow on the M4 westbound out of London. The exit slip road at junction 4B for the M25 is partially blocked because of an accident. In Hackney, roads are closed because of the Hackney Half Marathon, including Homerton High Street, Victoria Park Road and Morning Lane. It's slow in Barking on the A13 westbound at the Lodge Avenue flyover. A lane stays closed for emergency repairs. In West Norwood, Knights Hill is blocked both ways because of an accident at Crowndale. There are queues in Caterham. The A22 Godson Road is closed in both directions because of an accident at the Caterham bypass. And on the rails, there are cancellations on Great Northern and Thameslink. That's because of a shortage of train crew. LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Health tourism, it's an issue that makes me very angry. Do you know why? Because it's called the National Health Service, not the International Health Service, and we, frankly, have been taken for mugs for year after year after year. What does health tourism cost us? An estimated 1 to 2 billion sterling every single year. Now, I tried to make an issue of this back in the 2015 general election. Have a listen to this. I'll then tell you what the reaction to it was.
I mentioned health tourism. OK, here's a fact. And I'm sure the other people will be mortified that I dare to talk about it. There are 7,000 diagnoses in this country every year for people who are HIV positive, which is not a good place for any of them to be, I know. But 60% of them are not British nationals. You can come into Britain from anywhere in the world and get diagnosed with HIV and get the retroviral drugs that cost up to £25,000 per year per patient. I know there are some horrible things happening in many parts of the world, but what we need to do is to put the National Health Service there for British people and families who in many cases have paid into this system for decades.
Now, I said that in the leaders' debate back in 2015. I was on the panel with David Cameron, Nick Clegg, David Miliband and others. And I mean, you would have thought, to look at Miliband's face particularly, you would have thought that I was sort of King Herod, that I'd advocated killing the firstborn. And of course, the headlines were that what I'd done was a total disgrace, a complete embarrassment. It was awful. What was interesting about it was as the weeks and months went by, I started to get letters sent to me by people who were HIV sufferers saying, actually, our ability to access the care we need has been diminished hugely since we sent out this message that people can come here from all over the world, get this test and get the anti-retroviral drugs. So I've tried for years to make this a big issue that we could talk about. And it seems perhaps we are at last getting somewhere because NHS bosses have launched a crackdown on health tourism. They're going to have crack squads going into hospitals and looking at people who come predominantly from outside the European Union. So if you fly in on a plane, give birth in an NHS hospital, we're going to give you a bill for £7,000. If you come in and get some form of heart surgery, we're going to give you a bill for £16,000. If you get standard oncology cancer treatment, you're going to get a bill for £15,000. Is this the right approach? Is the right approach to go into hospitals and issue people who are having treatment with bills? Or does that mean that we frankly wouldn't be the kind of civilised country that we pride ourselves on being? Does this issue of health tourism make your blood boil? Now, within the European Union, in theory, there isn't a problem, because we all get treatment in each other's countries, and then everybody settles up. The problem is we settle up our bills with the rest of Europe. Many of the other European countries appear to be deeply reluctant to settle up their bills with us. So this does operate both inside and outside the European Union. And, yeah, do you know something? Looking back on it now, 3 years on, I don't regret for one moment pointing out that 60% of the patients we're treating in this country for HIV come from overseas. Maybe you agree with me. Maybe you think it's beyond the pale. Either way, surely, this is a problem that somehow we have to deal with. Nigel, we may be a civilised country, but we have a National Health Service, not an international one. So yes, people should pay who come in from abroad. There is another way of doing this, of course. One is to send in crack squads and hit squads. The other would be to make sure that people who travel to this country have the relevant health insurance with them. Quite difficult to get into America unless you've got some valid form of health insurance. So maybe that's a way that you do it. Or does that just make, border checks, border controls more cumbersome and more difficult? Or could the whole thing be done online? And I'm particularly keen this morning. I want to hear from anybody that works within the National Health Service. And, you don't have to give your real name if you are worried about some sort of, bosses clamping down upon you. But how much of a problem, if you're working in the NHS, how much of a problem is it that we're giving care to people from overseas and we frankly haven't got enough resources to go round for British people? And I think this is a big issue. I'm surprised, to be honest with you, that the other political parties have not picked this up and been stronger with it. But for some reason, it seems to be, it's one of those subjects almost that it's too difficult for anybody to touch. And of course, in my case, using HIV as the example, with 60% coming from overseas, people hated it. But I think I was right then, and I think I'm right now. The question is, how do we actually do it? Julie is calling from Coventry. Good morning, Julie.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So what's your experience of this, Julie?
Well, up until recently, about a year ago, I worked in a doctor's surgery. We used to get a terrific amount. We're in the Midlands, so a terrific amount of registrations at our surgery. And even though the passports of the people, we used to always have to take the passports for registration, used to say not eligible for NHS funding. So we used to query that. In the end, we tried what was then the PCT. We phoned them, contacted them to say, look, the passports are saying not eligible for NHS funding. The PCT at the time said, yes, it's still okay to register them. So there was hardly anybody at all that was not registered at our surgery.
So pretty much anybody, Julie, pretty much anybody could walk into your surgery. You wouldn't know whether they were. You wouldn't know, of course, whether they were in the country legally or not, would you?
No, as long as they came in. We used to take ID, so one of the things would be a passport, which clearly said not eligible for NHS funding, and yet we would still be able to register them. And
they would all have address, and they would all give you an address where they were living, yeah?
Usually a couple of pieces of ID.
It
was very iffy because sometimes, in fact, I used to write onto the notes as I went into the doctors. Personally, myself, I used to nearly always ask for dates of birth, which they were expecting people to ask the names. It was easy to find them on the register if you asked the dates of birth, and quite often they'd give a different date of birth. So you kind of assumed they probably weren't who they even said they were. They were coming under somebody else's ID.
And so, Julie...
But of course, at that stage...
Not eligible...
Once they were registered.
Not eligible for treatment, and yet you were... But you were registering them anyway, and that presumably means...
We were told to,
yeah. And you were treating them as well?
Yes.
And how did that make you feel, Julie?
Cross. Very cross. You knew the system was being abused, but when the PCT, which was PCT then, was telling you still do it, at what point the receptionists were gobsmacked, and presumably the doctors too.
So is it time, Julie? Is it time we got a bit tougher?
Oh, I think it's time we got very much tougher.
Yeah, OK. Listen, Judy, thank you. And that's a very, very useful call. There's somebody there who's been working within the National Health Service, and they're told from upon high, just register them, just treat them. This is not what the NHS was set up to do. It's not what people in this country pay their taxes for. That's what I think. Annabelle is calling from Hull. Good morning, Annabelle.
Morning, Nigel. You all right?
Yes, I am. But I just wish we'd really get to grips with this, Annabelle.
Now, you see, if you came back then it might be a bit better.
Well, you just listened to a clip, Annabelle, of me up against our great political leaders in 2015, and all I got for it was abuse.
Yes, it's because it's bored. The big R word comes up. However, the reason I'm cross about it, because I have a very, very close family member who works for the NHS within the department that actually attempts to reclaim the money.
Right.
And I think what he said is 0.0004 of anything is ever claimed, because usually they abscond, leave the country, and it's never, they won't get it, they won't pay it back. So, and this reciprocal agreement that the EU has, you should see the amount of medicine that finds its way back to Poland.
It's not being honoured, is it?
No.
No, as you say, in theory, with the European Union, there isn't a problem because of reciprocity, but it doesn't actually work, and we are big-time losers on that. But I mean, Annabelle, tell me, what should we do? I mean, for people coming in who we can be pretty sure are not going to pay their bills, even if your son chases them, do we just refuse treatment?
Difficult question if it was your son laying on the floor in America.
Well, but this is the point, isn't it?
Yeah, but I would have to have insurance.
Yep.
This is what I don't get. Why do we pay holiday insurance to go to Europe? If I want to go in Spain for a week, I have to take out holiday insurance, but it's in the EU, so I don't get it. If a Spaniard comes here, they don't pay holiday insurance or any insurance. So maybe I agree with the former lady, saying about some form of ID on their entry document. That would help, but like she says, they probably come under a different name, as they often do.
We're still a long way from solving it. Annabelle from Hull, thank you. And those last two calls, that is very interesting. That's the measure of it. People working within the NHS, deeply frustrated about what they're being asked to do. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC, and it's now 11:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Joining me in the studio now to take your calls is the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick.
So we've got another £110 million. I will be putting that money into the fight against violent crime on the streets of London. The Met is recruiting, and we want people to join us as police officers.
Do you have a number of how many you're seeking to recruit?
More than 500 more than we currently have by the beginning of next year.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With The Times. Be not just informed, but well informed.
Businesses do not like uncertainty, yet uncertainty is inevitable with Brexit looming. Against this backdrop, only businesses that plan ahead and anticipate better will be able to weather the challenges and capitalise on opportunities. At Barnes Rofe, we'll help you get ready with detailed budgets and forecasts so that you're better equipped to deal with the uncertainties ahead. Get ready for a Brexit future. Call Barnes Rofe today. Barnes Rofe. Clever accountants for business.
My house, my office, they're a mess. You need London Storage Vaults. Their self-storage units are in an underground vault near Oxford Circus, so they're completely safe. They're also climate controlled, so they're ideal for anything from paperwork to fine wines. Sounds great. They'll collect your stuff for free if you're in zones 1 and 2. There's 24/7 access and all from just £10 a week.
London Storage Vaults, the future of self-storage. Visit londonstoragevaults.com. Terms and conditions apply.
We're connected. We are the destination of award-winning apprenticeships. #We are Woking for success. We are graduate opportunities with 1,000 new jobs as our town transforms together. We are the hub for innovation and we are open for business. So join the conversation at wearewoking.com.
Do you or a loved one have Alzheimer's disease and problems sleeping? Then St Pancras Clinical Research in London would like to hear from you. We're looking for volunteers aged 50 plus with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease to take part in a clinical research study. If you qualify, you'll be paid for your time and reasonable expenses. Find out more at stpancrasclinicalresearch.com. That's stpancrasclinicalresearch.com.
Don't miss Oak Furniture Land's up to 50% off Big Price Drop event. There's amazing deals on 100% solid hardwood collections. Hurry, Big Price Drop must end Sunday.
Often, the post is just takeaway leaflets and bills and people trying to sell you stuff you don't need. But now and again, the post contains something life-changing, like the envelope you've been sent for Christian Aid Week. Because by using it to donate just a £5, you could help change the lives of people around the world. People like Marceline, whose home was destroyed by a hurricane. So please keep an eye on your doormat this Christian Aid Week, because together we're stronger than the storms.
You probably think you're pretty good at multitasking behind the wheel. I mean, you have to multitask to drive. So what's wrong with checking your phone? The thing is, your brain simply doesn't work. Even a for quick reply affects your concentration and makes you less able to react to hazards. If you use a mobile phone while driving, you're 4 times more likely to crash. Think. Put your phone away.
Imagine what it's like to be a road worker on a motorway. Please drive carefully through roadworks.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, The Nigel Farage Show.
Health tourism is a tough issue. Most people, when pressed, would agree that actually we shouldn't be losing 1 to 2 billion sterling every year on health tourism. Where it gets tricky is when you ask the question, what to do about it? What if somebody is sitting in a doctor's surgery and they may well have fake ID, but if they need very important, urgent medical treatment, do we, as other parts of the world would do to us, say, can we have your credit card, please? But if they can't produce it, do we just sort of chuck them out onto the street, or do we treat them? We are a civilised country, we are a caring country, but I think we feel that we're being taken for mugs. I haven't yet found absolutely the answer. I think insurance, travel insurance, must be a big part of it. Sarah on Facebook says, yes, it's absolutely the right approach. If there was plenty of money to go around, I'd say let's treat everyone. However, we know what the state of affairs is. Tina says, you get the money. Charge before treatment. It's the only way. Nowhere else would you get free healthcare. Well, in general terms, Tina, that is true. I would guess there is a difference, is there not, between absolutely urgent treatment, a car crash or whatever it may be, and somebody who perhaps needs elective surgery. Keith is calling from Stoke Newington. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Nigel. Yes, I think in the case of HIV, it's a very special case, a different case, and I think the nation should contribute to a pool of money so it is treated, whichever country it affects, because if it doesn't, it's going to be so damaging and devastating to everybody.
But Keith, just before you move on, my argument was, and they're 2015 figures, I don't have the updates, but if 60% of all of our resource in this country that's going into HIV is being used for overseas patients, that leaves less for our people, doesn't it?
Oh, I totally and utterly agree with you, Nigel. I'm just saying that there should be an international pool of money which each country contributes to address that. It shouldn't be just down to England to treat everybody with HIV.
No, quite. No, absolutely. No, fine. We're at one on that. OK, and more generally, Keith, I mean, what do you do? You've got somebody, they may be in the country legally, they may be in the country illegally, but somebody who needs medical treatment. Would you, Keith from Stoke Newington, demand that they give their credit card first?
Well, unfortunately, it all comes to economics, because we don't sort out the economics. We're all going to go broke, which is the trouble with the EU. I agree with you that they do have to have some form of payment. And I think one of your last callers was a very good idea about they have to have an insurance policy to cover them. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant.
No, I think that is ultimately the right solution, Keith. I thank you for your call. Dave says, if anybody's flown here without having insurance, the airline should be billed. That would solve the problem. It would certainly help, wouldn't it? And already, of course, ferry companies and Eurostar are desperate not to be used as conduits for illegal immigration because they get fined a couple of £1,000 a person, which, of course, is why we've got people sneaking onto lorries at Dunkirk and Calais and elsewhere. Nigel, you need to tell your listeners, people from outside the EU pay an NHS surcharge on their visas. You should ask the government what they do with that money. Michael, interesting point, but it's a tiny surcharge. But because the problem is, you could argue, Michael, that money doesn't go from one tax source directly towards an outcome. It all just goes into the middle. And, of course, there are plenty of people coming to this country who don't need visas anyway. Nigel, immigrants with HIV has deluged Europe, up to 70%, putting strain, depleting funds. But it's not a subject that you can touch. Yeah, well, I did touch it, and goodness me, as I said, you'd have thought I was King Herod. Use existing identity cards, national insurance cards, just add a photo to the card. and show it when you go for treatment. I have always been against identity cards. I've always been against the idea that I should be stopped walking down Bromley High Street and asked to produce my papers. But I have to say, over the course of the last couple of months, I'm beginning to think on issues like this, there may be no other solution. But if I have to have an ID card before I get, that I have to carry at all times and show before I get treatment, can I first have some absolute assurance that people who haven't got UK ID cards or relevant insurance won't get treated? Otherwise, why should I bother? Let's ask Jackie in Eltham what she makes of this. Hi.
Hello, Nigel. I know your mum, Barbara.
Okay,
anyway,
very good.
Yes. Yeah. I worked for the health service for 23 years, Nigel, so I saw it in more of the T-shirt. Whenever I go out for even a day trip out, they ask for insurance in England, yeah?
Yep.
We go up to Norfolk. So, have you got insurance? Luckily, we go to Australia a lot, so we have a yearly insurance. Otherwise, it's quite expensive. But people can afford to come to England. They've got to come with insurance. When we go to Australia, we've got to have insurance because they certainly wouldn't treat us. One of my daughters was very ill in Australia. We had to ring the insurance company to see if they'd even treat her. So please, we have to say, if you come to England, you need travel insurance. It's as simple as that, Nigel.
Yes, even if you emigrate, Jackie, to Australia, for the first few years, you can't get automatic healthcare there, can you?
Put a big bond. I know.
So you think insurance is probably the answer, yeah?
I think so. I think it's fundamental. We go all over the world. We go to England, and they'd like us to have it, but as I say, we've got a yearly one, Nigel, so... But lots of people, I say, well, hang on, we've got a health service here.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if you died up north or something, it cost you a lot of money, and thank you very much for that tip. But anyway, Nigel, yes, health insurance, we must make it very clear now that people do not come to this country without health insurance. They can afford the fare, they can afford the insurance.
Jackie, just sort of give you a scenario, and a moral dilemma, if I can, on this Sunday morning. Let's say that somebody who illegally has snuggled into this country or has overstayed their visa. I mean, they're the two chief ways that the illegal migrant population is made up. So you've got an illegal immigrant in this country with a serious health condition. Do you treat him or her, or do you just say no?
Well, in the health service, they'd go to casualty, they'd be rushed to casualty, they'd be seen before anyone would even ask, Nigel. This is the trouble. Having worked in the health system 23 years, I could write a book, and there's certain things I'd like to tell you, but I'm not allowed to, about what went on. It's unbelievable.
But there are moral issues here, Jackie, aren't there? I mean, I mean, the idea that we'd leave someone to die on the pavement rather than treat them at A&E, it's not kind of our way, is it?
No, but that's what happened in America. We had to ring through to get permission for them to take my daughter in.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I think people take advantage. I think it's a lot of health tourism. I know that. And certain ladies used to come from another part of Ireland for whatever treatment. I go up in the morning, get some money, and they're gone.
And they're having a referendum on that now, aren't they? It's happening in Ireland. In fact, it'll be next weekend. Jackie, thanks for the call. And Jackie, thinks we've got to be tougher, got to be a bit more like America. Otherwise, people will go on taking advantage. What about the number of women from overseas who travel here as visitors but are pregnant and stay long enough to have the baby delivered here? Suggest you inquire as to how many foreigners, mainly EU, are treated in this manner. And he talks here, Ian talks about Swindon Maternity Hospital, etc. Yeah, look, Ian, it is scandalous, and it's not just from European countries. We've seen the same from African countries and elsewhere. I suppose in one way it's flattering that people think we've got good healthcare in this country, but we are being taken for a ride. We've got to get tougher. But it's not easy because it poses big moral dilemmas. And, I understand Jackie's point. Well, if you haven't got a credit card, you die on the pavement outside. That may happen in many other parts of the world. I just don't see us being able to enforce that. So insurance seems to me to be the best way forward. Gregory is calling from Croydon. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
So...
Right, sir. I've got a couple of points that you could hear. First of all, my son was born at Croydon Mayday Hospital.
Yep.
And my wife paid for him. She's Japanese.
Okay.
Now, last year, she lives in Ireland with my son. Last year, somebody broke his arm, and I got a bill for it. At no stage did a doctor or nurse ask me for the fee. Straight away, at reception, they presented me with a bill.
And this was in Ireland?
This was in Ireland, yeah.
Really?
Yes, because I've got a home in Ireland. I stay here or work in the UK and send money
Right.
back there to my wife and son.
Yep. So you got a bill for that. And your wife, when she was given a bill for the birth of your son, she actually paid the bill, did she?
Yeah, we paid.
Goodness me, how very strange. Because it seems that no one actually pays these bills.
No. What was so strange is that it was the midwife that come up with a credit card. Now, as I say, in Ireland, It's not the medical staff that deal with it. It's the administration staff, which is what it should be. If you get the administration staff to do it, they're sitting there moving paper about. They can do that.
All right,
it's
so
simple enough.
You see it as all being quite straightforward then, Gregory, really?
I see it straightforward in that way. Now, if you get people like you've just described who come here, illegal immigrants, just to bill the government from where they're from.
Yes, but then you have to get them to actually pay, don't you?
Well, you can put it on their bill.
Or we could deduct it from the foreign aid budget, couldn't we?
Well, yeah, you could do that. There you go.
Or from EU contributions.
Yep, exactly.
You know, if Poland aren't paying the money and
solutions.
Maybe we're not giving the invoice quickly enough. I mean, we could be a bit at fault here. But, yeah, no, there are things that we could do, Gregory. Do you sense that this issue that is costing us £1 to £2 billion a year is something that makes people angry?
It makes me angry. I can assure you that,
That's why you picked up the phone, isn't it?
when I went to Ireland and they presented it to me, I understood. I thought, fair enough, I'm not the thing, you know.
Yep.
I haven't got the paperwork. Fine, I paid it. It was €180. Right? Now, if we do that, we might actually be able to afford other things.
Well, that's the point, Gregory. Gregory, I thank you for your call on this Sunday morning. Nigel, it's about time we charged the health tourist. My dentist will not look in my mouth unless I have paid and signed the form. So why does not the receptionist ask for proof before you recede, says John from Eltham. We've had a caller from Eltham too this morning. What is it with LBC and Eltham? I don't know. Yeah, John, that's all well and good, but we had an NHS receptionist from the Midlands who was our first caller today who said she was told from upon high, even though they're not eligible for health treatment, put them on the register and treat them. That is the culture we've had in this country. Anything to do with immigration or people from overseas, everyone's scared to mention because otherwise they fear they're going to get screamed at. I tried to break that in 2015 and goodness me, what good it did me. Or maybe it did. Maybe. If NH bosses are now launching a big crackdown on health tourism, maybe we're beginning, at last, to get somewhere. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show. It's now 11:30 and time for the news with Philip Chrysakos.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will head back to Kensington Palace in London this morning after partying into the night at their special wedding reception in Windsor in Berkshire. It's not yet known where Harry and Meghan will honeymoon. Before they do, they'll resume their royal duties on Tuesday, including attending Prince Charles's 70th birthday party. A murder investigation has begun after a man was found stabbed in the early hours of this morning in southwest London. The victim, thought to be in his 20s, was found in Mitcham. A 44-year-old man has been arrested. Scotland's First Minister says she'll consider again the question of another independence referendum. Nicola Sturgeon says she'll make a decision once there's clarity over the future relationship between the UK and the EU over Brexit. LBC weather, warm and sunny, showers in the northwest, a high of 22 degrees.
LBC travel is very slow on the M4 westbound out of London. The exit slip road at junction 4B for the M25 is partially blocked because of an accident. In Hackney, roads are closed because of the Hackney Half Marathon, including Homerton High Street and Victoria Park Road. It's slow embarking on the A13 westbound at the Lodge Avenue flyover. A lane stays closed for emergency repairs. In West Norwood, Knights Hill is blocked both ways because of an accident at Crown Dale. In Surrey, the A22 Caterham bypass is closed in both directions. That's because of an accident between Godstone Road and the Wopses Lodge roundabout. And on the rails, there are cancellations on Great Northern and Thames Link because of a shortage of train crew. LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff.
This is LBC.
1 in 4 children believe potatoes grow on trees. 1 in 5 children believe fish fingers are made from chicken. And 1 in 8 adults believe the moon landings didn't happen. People believe all sorts of strange things. Some people believe that insurance companies try to avoid paying claims. But last year, Zurich paid 99% of insurance claims made by their UK customers. Zurich, an insurance company you can believe in. To find out more, visit zurich.co.uk/99.
Right now, you can drive off with Aviva car insurance rated 5-star by de facto from just £176 a year. And should you need us, our claims line is open 24/7. Get a quote today, direct from aviva.co.uk.
10% of customers paid £176 or less for our standard cover. November 2017 to January 2018. Priced individually.
Every day, 2 people are killed or seriously injured on London streets by vehicles travelling at inappropriate speeds. So what is inappropriate speed? It's pulling away too quickly when the lights change. It's accelerating harder than you need to. It's not giving yourself time to brake if someone steps out. If you're driving, when your foot goes down, the risks go up. Think. Slow down. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Clear a desk, clear an office, clear a worksite, or clear a warehouse. With Clearabee, you can clear your work's rubbish quickly, easily and affordably. Choose our B-Bag skip bags, which can fit where skips can't and are suitable for day-to-day waste, specialist construction and more. Or let our man and van rubbish removal service clear it all for you. The choice is yours. Book now at clearabee.co.uk.
Clear rubbish easily. Clearabee.
Dacia, a car company unlike others. I like that. Europe's fastest selling automotive brand. I like it. The Dacia Sandero, a What Car Award winner 6 straight years. Like that too. And it's yours from just $6,995. Very likeable. Read the glowing reviews at dacia.co.uk from our lovely customers. What's not to like? Seems more and more people are warming to the Dacia way. You'll like it too. At participating dealers only.
For a short-term loan, choose Fenovo.com. You'll be glad we're quick. A decision could take less than a minute. You'll be pleased with the rate. We've got one of the best APRs around at representative 448% APR. And you'll be happy with the process. Just text HAPPY to 66777. Fenovo.com. Your loan, your call.
Fenovo.com. Text HAPPY to 66777.
Late repayment can cause you serious money problems. For help, go to moneyadviceservice.org.uk.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Well, we all want to get tough on health tourism. It just gets more tricky when you start to find out exactly how do we do it. Insurance, yes, but what happens if people present themselves for treatment and they're in a serious condition? Are we the kind of country that turns them away? Seems that happens around much of the rest of the world. Jan says, I've lived and worked overseas, and for a serious operation for my brother-in-law, his wife had to find $20,000 before a doctor would even look at him. Peter says a friend of mine's son fell from a balcony in Bulgaria. And when my friend arrived at the hospital, his son was laid outside. The hospital had put him there until he had proof of insurance 4 years ago. Reciprocity, ? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? That this is happening in France and elsewhere, that rather than trusting on the system where governments pay each other, it seems health services in other countries want to get the cash a bit more quickly. I guess who can blame them? I was taken seriously ill twice, once in France and once in Austria. In both cases, I received first-class treatment, but in recovery, I was asked how I was going to pay. Luckily, I had good medical insurance. We should insist on the same. People would just abscond if presented with a bill, says Richard in Cheltenham. Tony is calling from Harlow. Good morning, Tony.
What's it, Nigel? Yeah, we've got the biggest tourist thing, one of the biggest tourists in the world come here, all the tourists, they come here. But what they say, where can we go next year? I know, let's go to England, you don't have to pay any medical insurance. So that's an extra couple of drinks for us to buy. I've been paying, I left school at 14, I'm 70, I've been paying every month into the National Health, and I've paid into that hundreds of times over for whatever I want. And I was in Mason's Hill Hospital years ago, in Bromley.
I was there for 4 months once. Yeah, go on. Yeah,
and there was American GI there. He was getting seen to, and he had accident emergency. They patched him up. He came out. I watched him. He went to the counter, to the receptionist, pulled his wallet out, and said, "How much do I owe you?" She said, "Nothing." He looked up in the air. He probably thought, I think I moved there.
Yeah. That's our culture. But, Tony, you've paid all this national insurance, but don't you feel better about yourself as a human being, knowing that your taxpayers' money is being used for people from all over the world?
Yeah. Of course I do. I love it. You know what I'm saying? I'm sitting here with my cigar. I love it.
Tony, I think, there is... at the end of that clip that we played of me back in the election of 15, I said at the end that families have been paying into this for decades, and the idea that you can just waltz into this country, have a baby and then leave, it's outrageous, isn't it?
Yes, and also you've predicted so many things that have come true.
Well, I've done my best, Tony. I've done my best, matey. I've done my best.
No, you have. You predicted so many things that have happened. It's not mentioned much, so I'm mentioning it.
Well, thank you. Tony, you're a star. Have a great Sunday. And Chris, rather backing up what Tony said about the American GI in Bromley General Hospital, Chris from Wiltshire says, I dislocated my shoulder in France last year. I had both an EU Health Service green card and full health insurance. But even so, the hospital wouldn't consider doing anything until I went to the cash point and drew the money to pay in full. After that, the treatment was carried out. I then had to try and recover the money on returning to the UK. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? It clearly, across Europe, there are people taking a much more direct response. I've been in A&E when two separate people have offered to pay. This is like the American GI. They've offered to pay and told by the receptionist that the treatment was free. You see, there we are. That's the culture. The National Health Service, free at the point of use. Yes, but not for the entire world, I think, is the message. Debbie says, if people around the world like our system, why do they not try to emulate it for their own nations? Well, because they don't want to be taken for a ride, I guess, Debbie. And Sandra says, my sister-in-law is Thai, and she had to pay for her thyroid operation here in Bristol. So why not charge everybody else? It's the right way, seeing as we have to pay if we go to another country. Sandra, I think there is huge general agreement on that. It's just how tough do we get? And, we've got this report overnight. It's here in the Mail on Sunday, and they've been campaigning on this issue and basically saying that there are going to be these crack squads going into hospitals and demanding that people pay. Difficult, I suppose, to ask nurses and doctors to get credit cards out of people because they are the caring professions. I'm going to ask Avi in Cheam what his view is. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Nigel. Nigel, I'm somebody who have travelled to this country on business visa, I would say, for 10 years, and now I'm here resident for last 8 years.
Uh-huh.
So over my experience of last 18 years, in the first 10 years as well, whenever I was entering here, I always had my insurance with me. So I'm not able to appreciate if somebody is legally here, then they should have some paperwork by virtue of which, anyways, they should be able to pay for their medical expenses. Why should this be even an issue at all?
Did anybody, Avi, ever check whether you had insurance when you were coming through passport control?
Yeah, I would say, without my insurance, I wouldn't even get my visa.
Okay.
Without visa, business visa, I was certainly on expenses. My organization would have footed the bill. Nonetheless, I always had those papers. And I'm saying it works same in Japan, Singapore, Netherlands. These are the countries where I've lived for, say, more than 6 months. And I have been there on business visa, business purposes as well.
And now you're a resident here. You're living here.
8 years, paying taxes here.
Paying taxes.
Yeah. But
so how do you feel? Let me ask you, as a UK taxpayer, how would you deal with the dilemma of somebody, and bear in mind, there's at least 1 million illegal immigrants in this country, but it's probably much nearer 2 and maybe more than that. How do we deal with illegal immigrants that are in this country that are expecting free healthcare? What would you do?
I would say, with any illegal immigrant, you will do whatever law requires you to do. But having said that, if they are in hospital and if they're not able to provide, so whichever agency is responsible for them should be taking care of them. As simple as that, isn't it?
Well, it should be, but it's not, is it? Because, it does present, or it can present, some quite big moral dilemmas. But look, the way you were doing it clearly was absolutely above board. You make the point about a visa. I wonder, whether sometimes, frankly, we're not doing our checks properly. Avi, I thank you very much indeed. And it's your tax, Avi, as much as it is anybody's. Thank you for the call. If countries do not pay their medical bills, then we should ban entry to their citizens until they do, says Jane. Jane, that's the sort of thing President Trump would say, and the world would go absolutely bonkers if he did so. I'm going to go to Finley in Sevenoaks. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Nigel. Thanks for having me.
Not a bit.
Seven or 8 years ago, at the age of 65, I had a very bad skiing accident in Canada. I was fully insured. I was taken by ambulance off the slopes. I'd badly smashed my collarbone.
Yeah.
And when I got to the hospital, I was put on a stretcher type thing, and I was asked to pay up front before they would see me. I said I'd got insurance. You were talking of insurance.
Yes.
They absolutely didn't want to know the insurance, didn't want to know anything. They wouldn't entertain me, bearing in mind my age and the pain I was in. They did not want to know. I had to get an ambulance back to where I was staying, and I had to come home from Canada early. I had to disguise it on the aeroplane because I wouldn't have been allowed on the aeroplane.
Gosh, you really went through it, Finley.
Oh my God, it was dreadful, but they had absolutely no sympathy at all.
So let's
wouldn't
just
accept my insurance.
Let's just get this right. So you're lying on a stretcher.
Yeah.
In pain.
In the hospital.
In Canada.
For the money up front. I didn't have the money to. They asked for $1,000 straight up front for the bed for the night, and I wasn't really. I was a bit belligerent. I wasn't willing to pay this because I was fully comprehensive insurance. Didn't want to know.
No, well they know how difficult.
Within days of getting back, I got a bill for the ambulances, which of course I paid for.
But they probably know, Finley, that insurance companies can be notoriously tough to deal with, and they weren't taking any chances at all. Finley, you've been through the tough end of health tourism, right? Where you were treated as a suspect who probably wouldn't pay unless they got the assurance up front. Do you think our approach in this country, and we've had, people on this morning who, working for GP surgeries, told just to register and treat people who weren't eligible in this country. Which system is better? The Canadian system that you suffered under, or the British system, which appears to be a bit of a free-for-all?
Well, I think our system's the best in the world, regardless. I know there's a lot wrong with it, but there's an awful lot right with it.
Yeah, I think that... Finley, do you know what? I've been in emergency twice in my life, and if you're in real trouble, I think our health system is brilliant. Whether it's quite so good at diagnostics and other things is perhaps a different question. Finley from Sevenoaks, thank you for your call and your story. That's the tough end of town, isn't it? You're lying on a stretcher in agony, been smashed up in a skiing accident, you've got health insurance, but unless you give the Canadian hospital your credit card, you're not going to get treated. It's a hell of a contrast to hear. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It is now 11:45.
This is LBC.
Hi, I'm Chloe from Network Rail. I have some important news if you're travelling over the bank holiday at the end of May. From Saturday, the 26th, to Monday, the 28th of May, our team of engineers will be working to deliver essential rail upgrades. Some services will be affected, so please check before you travel at nationalrail.co.uk/May or contact your train operator. Network Rail, working for you.
It's simple. If your business isn't using WG for Business, you could be paying too much. WG could save you up to 45% on all your office supplies, from printing and all your day-to-day office supplies, and now with confidential shredding from Rexel, ensuring you are GDPR compliant with disposal of customer information. We are so confident we can save you money, we will give you your first quarter savings in advance. Just text audit to 87007 and start saving your business money with WGforbusiness.com. Conditions and contract apply.
Here's another true story from Aldermartin, Baines and Cuthbert. When fire tore through a residential London development in 2015, the local health and safety executive were quickly on the scene. Fortunately, ABC had all the right health and safety paperwork and certificates, and to the great relief of the building's owners, were able to prove there was no fault. No fuss, no hassle. For block management, ABC Estates will give your story an ending that'll make you as happy as Larry. Find out more at abcestates.co.uk or call 0800 888 6688.
If you own a Swiss watch and it's time to sell it, speak to watches.co.uk. The whole process runs like clockwork. Rolex, Patek Philippe, Omega and more. It only takes a couple of ticks and we pay immediately. Or if you just fancy a change, we could take yours in part exchange. From time on your hands to money in your pocket, it couldn't be easier with watches.co.uk. The pre-owned Swiss watch specialist.
Getting set for a sizzling summer? At B&Q, the Bloomer Rockwell 200 Charcoal Barbecue is just £83. And Dial 5 Kilo Instant Light Charcoal is 2 for £11. Don't forget a grill brush too. So, for low prices on barbecue essentials, you can do it when you B&Q it. Charcoal £7 per bag.
Coming up at 12 on LBC, Majid Nawaz.
For a group of black nationalist students, she's not black enough. For English nativists, she's too black for the royals. Is Prince Harry's wedding to Meghan a step forward for race relations?
Majid Nawaz on LBC. The Nigel Farage Show. Text 84850.
Well, it's a huge issue. Health, tourism, and we're getting, stories of people around other parts of the world. Even though they've got the right insurance, the hospitals won't treat them unless they produce a credit card. We seem to be the other way. Hit squads to reclaim NHS money. I'll believe it when I see it. I won't hold my breath. It's just the usual lip service from the government. Oh, don't depress me. I was hoping things might be moving on a little bit. You're probably right. Darren is calling from Birmingham. Good morning, Darren.
Morning, Nigel. I'm a bit confused about the way that the NHS is dealing with this. My wife's Filipino and she came over on a UK spouse visa last year, for which we had to pay a quite significant amount plus the health surcharge. She was actually pregnant at the time, and when she went for the first checkup at the hospital, before they would commence any treatment, I had to supply copies of the visa and also the copies of the receipt for the payment of the NHS surcharge. So I think that we've got it right, but I just think that the government and the NHS itself are notoriously bad at implementing the rules that are in place.
Yes, I mean, Darren, you've done it legally and properly, and that is how the system ought to work, and clearly, in your case, it has worked. And yet, from just down the road in Coventry, we had a lady on earlier who was a receptionist who said she was just told, even though their passports say they're ineligible, just sign them up and treat them. So there's something very inconsistent here, Darren, isn't there?
Well, exactly. I agree, and this is where I'm saying that I don't think it's that we've got it wrong. I just think that we don't implement it correctly.
Yes.
And,
yes.
This is. And this is the reason why it's so inefficient,
Yeah, and why don't we get our money back from the other European Union states?
Well, exactly. I mean, I don't know what we could do about that, but, like you say, we're good at paying our bills, but they're not. But they're basically not so good at paying their bills. But the question you asked earlier about should we ever do, I would hate to live in a country where you had that guy that had the skiing accident in Canada.
Yes.
I would hate to live in a country where we would leave somebody standing there in pain. Well,
he was an old age pensioner on a stretcher, smashed up. He thought he'd done all the right things by having the necessary health insurance, and yet he had to produce. And that's Canada, Darren, which is a pretty liberal country in many ways.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to see us go as far as that.
No, so you think morally better to be a bit weak on this than be too tough on this, yeah?
Yeah, yes, I think so. Especially when it comes to emergency treatments. Obviously, longer term treatment, yes, they should be looking at. But we should never turn anybody away just because they may not have been born here.
But Darren, do you understand the anger that I'm getting from callers and texters and tweeters this morning on this?
Well, I do, but I do think that some of it is from people that they read the headlines, but they don't actually have the experience or know that the procedures and the policies are there in place. It's just the fact that the government is notoriously poor at implementing them. Yeah. And yet, like I say, as soon as we went for the first appointment, we had to prove that she was eligible for treatment.
So the system can work, Darren. That's what your phone call tells me. Thank you. Thank you. Andy on Facebook says, this is why the Conservatives are allowing this to happen. They want to run the NHS into the ground and sell it off on the cheap. This is all preparing us for privatisation. What utter tosh, Andy, really. You know, it was the Blair government that did more privatisation of the National Health Service than anything that's been done by the Conservatives. Right. Now, a suggestion here from Mandy in Abbeymead in Gloucestershire that we should have an ID card for fags, booze, gambling, medication or the purchase of sharp objects. We must have, without travel insurance, no treatment. Tough, says Mandy. You can lie on the stretcher, like Finlay from Sevenoaks. But Darren says we're just not that kind of country. Ultimately, Darren is right. We are not that kind of country, but we are being taken for a ride. I am convinced of it. I think it's crazy. Robbie is calling from Edenbridge. Hello, Robbie.
Morning, Nigel. Nice to talk to you. First, thank you for dragging us out of the EU. I wanted to say that some time ago.
Well, that's very sweet of you. We're not quite out yet, but I hope we're on our way.
I mean, I totally agree with you on everything you've said about the NHS. And that gentleman who was having his little go against the Conservative government,
yes,
as a fairly good Conservative myself and a councillor, I believe that this government is the first one that has suggested asking immigrants to pay for their treatment.
Yes.
I don't think it's ever happened before. I've had experience myself. I was working in America 50 years ago, and a lady and I were jumping off the balcony of my ex-wife's flat. Don't ask why. We were both... well, I was tiddling and she wasn't. And I said, darling, you be careful, you know. And she said, well, look, I can't get... abortion in this country, so if I can't get rid of it this way, I'm going to go over to the UK and get it there. And that's been 50 years.
Yes.
I came back a few years later, I was in the Royal Eye Hospital. I don't know how many people there were from overseas then, but it was a good few of them. But we must stop this because the NHS is staggering. And if we don't do something about it now, I feel the NHS is going to fail. And as for this business about privatisation...
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. No, Robbie, it's not. But let me tell you what a bigger worry is. You know, I did my bit to try and raise this issue of health tourism, and the Mail newspaper have done a fair bit on it.
I know that, and I think you should be congratulated for that.
And it was a tough thing to do. Your political party called me all the names under the sun. I was
well, I apologise on behalf of
I was a barbarian and all the rest of it. But what I've noticed, Robbie, with Mrs May, whether it's as Home Secretary, whether it's as Prime Minister dealing with Brexit, whether it's one of her spokesmen talking about health, yes, I am pleased that at last we have a government talking about this issue. In fact, she even took the line. It's the National Health Service, not the International Health Service. The trouble is, Robbie, will they actually deliver?
Well, let's hope, Nigel. Let's hope. And just as a matter of interest, I was also at a very good school rather near yours, and I know your father, so you better be careful if we're talking future.
Goodness me. Right, Robbie, thank you. Well, a very great call. Well, so far this morning, someone knows my mum, someone knows my dad. I mean, it's not supposed to be a family show as such, but it appears to be this morning. Quite what Robbie was doing, jumping off a balcony, I've absolutely no idea, and that wasn't a recommendation for anyone else to do it, please. Jeff is calling from Munich. Hi, Jeff. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, Nigel. I'm not jumping off a balcony, and for Trouser Find in Munich, trusted enemy again. No?
It's nice to hear from you again. So, so what happens, Jeff? I mean, if I'm in Germany and I come from, I don't know, I might come from America for argument's sake, how tough would the Germans be on getting my credit card details or insurance policy before they treat me?
If you're not insured, you don't get sorted.
Simple,
There's a certain level of clearance. But what I'd like to tell you is the story that I had in Britain, if I can.
Go on.
You know, I'm an expatriate, a British expatriate, and I'm fully medically insured in Germany.
Uh-huh.
So I used to visit my old mum at Christmas time, and I got bitten by a cat.
Right.
And your listeners will laugh at that.
We're trying not to laugh, Jeff, but go on.
Yeah. So I had blood poisoning, cracking up and down the arms, and off to accident and emergency, 2 nights in hospital, excellent service, wonderful from the NHS. Thank you very much, for what they did, for me. It was absolutely brilliant. So then I go to the front desk, after they've released me, and I say, hey, I'm fully insured in Germany, technically a Krankenkasse, I'd like to pay. Or I'd like to fill in the forms. No. You're a British citizen, you have a national insurance number, no problem. Yeah, but I don't pay into the system in Britain. I live in Germany. They will pay, huh? And I would imagine that 2 nights in hospital would cost at least, 2,000.
Yeah, it's a couple of grand, isn't it? Yeah.
And I wanted to, but she said, no. That was an emergency, and we treat all emergencies free in Britain. You should know that. You're British. And I don't understand why they threw away the 2,500 that the German...
Yeah, you see, Jeff, you've made this point. We had another caller talk about an American GI coming out of Bromley Hospital offering to pay and being told there's no need. Others who've sent in SMS messages making the same point. You try to pay, and they don't want the money. So is it really... is this the culture of the NHS, Jeff, that needs rethinking?
Well, I'm wondering if there isn't a system, if there's a system set up, for expatriates or, foreign people or even British citizens who haven't paid in to pay, if the system is there and if they know about it.
Your situation is a little bit unique, but in general terms, we seem to be very good at providing free care from people from all over the world and not terribly good at reconciling any of it. Jeff, I thank you for your call and the story, and we didn't laugh, did we, when he said he was bitten by a cat, because, hey, that could be really, really nasty. This issue, and Robbie, the Conservative councillor from Edenbridge, made the point that this is now very much on the government's radar. They're talking about it. Let's see whether they deliver. I still don't think we're quite strong enough and tough enough to do it. I hope I'm wrong. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show, Sunday edition. I'm back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. At 3 this afternoon, it's Andrew Castle. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. Coming up, we have my hour-long interview with Canadian author and thinker Dr. Jordan Peterson. Before that, Italy seeks to throw the largest challenge to the European Union since Brexit by deporting 500,000 undocumented migrants. Denmark has slashed refugee benefits and put advertisements in Turkish and Lebanese newspapers warning of grim conditions for asylum seekers. Does there need to be a change to EU migration rules? But first, a group of black nationalist students studying for Britain's first black studies degree at Birmingham City University have described Princess Meghan as not black enough and her position as token. Similarly, English nativists are worrying that she's too black for the blue-blooded royals. Is Prince Harry's wedding to Meghan a step forward for race relations?
On your radio, on your phone, and here.
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's news.